Good afternoon. Welcome to Eretz Israel. I imagine, like a lot of places in the world right now, it's pretty hot. We've been running around getting ready for Holy Shabbat. And, it's another one of those days where the words keep weaving back. We've been dealing with this concept of the synchronicity of words in several little talks that I've done. And today's word is cooked. And of course, the first thing is, we're going to get cooked today. I'm sitting in the car in a parking lot. My wife says, it's hot. It's getting cooked out here, and it's okay. It's a word you probably use a million times for such an experience of being sitting in your car in the sun. All right, but then I come home and there's sudden urgency to cook, and there's a bunch of people in the kitchen cooking at once, and they're all running after the food and the items that you need to cook, and so cooking becomes this public thing, this activity. Then I go upstairs. I'm going to learn some Zohar. I got to get myself centered here. I open up the Zohar to the page in Parshat Pinchas, which is last week's Parsha, but it's a huge Parsha. It's like over 200 pages, this Parsha. It's a book of Zohar unto itself, Parshat Pinchas. And what do I open to out of all those pages? I open to this. Kivshan delay, do'ofe ba nehamad shechinte. God's furnace, God's furnace bakes the bread of the Shekhinah. Oh, was that just a little tiny click in the mind? God's furnace, God's oven, is where the bread of the Shekhinah is baked. What are we talking about here? The Zohar goes on to tell us that the idea of the cooking of the bread is parallel to the neshama being surrounded and baked by the divine presence. That the divine presence, when it's on you, you might not even know it, but if it's on you long enough, it's going to make you warm and soft and tasty. But really, it is this idea of being surrounded in the warmth of God. Because later the Zohar goes on to tell us that the idea of the heating of this oven is also parallel to God heating up his heart to melt judgment. And all of us go through this just about every day, where we have some judgment somewhere, and the heart is hard, and the heart doesn't want to budge, and it's cold, and well, we got to turn up the furnace, turn up the heat. That's the Shekhinah, warming the heart to open our mind and our empathetic system, our ability to care for others, to open the heart and warm it. This is like the oven that's baking the bread of the Shekhinah. So you see, the Zohar is just tracking after the rest of the words I'm hearing around me. Now you could say, well, okay, it's hot, it's July, it's the Middle East, and it's true. But we still see that the words are there, showing up in our everyday life. And so I'm asking myself, well, maybe, Avram, maybe you need some of this action. Maybe you need to jump in the oven of the Shekhinah a little bit and get baked a little better and get surrounded by some holiness. And I think about it, and I'm thinking, maybe there's some places I need to have a little less judgment as well. And so just the thought of it starts to move the heart. And then you start to think about, I have a resentment with this one, and this one owes me money, and this one said something unpleasant, and this one didn't answer the phone, and all these little judgments that follow us around are actually dipping into our joy. And they're dipping into our joy is taking out from this idea of the joy of the divine presence that rests on a person. And the Zohar goes on to tell us also that this fire, this kivshan, this oven, is not like a regular oven. Now there's, of course, the famous oven of Nimrod, which they stoked for 3 days before they threw Avram Avinu into it. I think they were doing it more to scare everybody and attract attention and bring people from the countryside. But they call it the oven of a hediot, a regular, a simple person, is not the oven we're talking about here. We're talking about the oven where of God's own heart, where he crushes his own judgment with mercy. So you see, God is very much operating along the same rules that a human being operates on. A closed heart, we need to crush it, we need to open it up, we need to heal, we need to have compassion, which is warmth, and then it becomes like this oven that bakes this pleasant bread, which is for the Shekhinah, the presence of Hashem. And then God moves out of what we call the place of anger, which in the 3 weeks that we're in now is a time of anger. I'm sure any spiritually minded person can sense the difference in the world right now. But when he crushes his anger, it's not with gevurah, might and strength. It's with mercy and compassion and patience. And these are the things we see that we need. The Zohar goes along and takes the cooking of bread further. It says, Nahamado right to eat solet. And then there's also this idea of the flour, which we make bread with, is the Torah. The Torah is the source ingredient of the inspiration that makes the bread. And the solet is the most refined flour that you can make. They say that they would sift the flour for the showbreads in the Beit HaMikdash 12 times. Once for each of the 12 different showbreads. And so that's a lot of sifting. But that only creates a more and more refined product. Now those sifters are also related to the 13 attributes of mercy. That each type of mercy that God revealed to Moses is a filter of a different aspect of judgment within us that needs to be fixed. So we're filtering judgment out of our compassion, and that creates this mercy. Malka le'inun de'itmar alayhu kol Yisrael b'nei melachim, to bring a king to the Jewish people. The Jewish people needed a king. They didn't come out of Egypt with a king when they became a nation. They had a prophet. They had Moshe, but he wasn't a king in the same context. A king is someone who organizes the army, who organizes the economy, who organizes the relations of the country to other countries. Moshe was basically dealing with getting the people out of Egypt, receiving God's word, and teaching it to them. He wasn't an international diplomat per se. He did happen to have a stint as king of Midian before he went to Egypt. However, the Zohar goes on this continuous development of the metaphor that the mechala, the tzadikaya, that the midot, the measures, the vessels of the righteous, eat nahama deoraita. There is the bread of the Torah. The ihu pesolet ve'inun avadin v'shvachot devei malka. And this idea parallels also the structure in a king's house where you have servants of all different levels, and each of those servants also corresponds to a level of what is sifted out of the flour. Again, the sifting of the people, the sifting not to put people down, but rather to lift up a divine service in a person that can become a leader of millions of people. See, we take, there's a problem in the world with this idea of democratic election, is because, okay, it's a nice idea that everybody can run for president. But when you look at the people that have the ability to run now because of the cost of becoming such a leader, where are the merits? Where are the good deeds? Where is the history of leadership? It all kind of gets pushed aside compared to who can afford the most expensive campaign. So the Zohar is telling us that the Torah is the flour, and it is that which makes the distinctions between different levels of quality in our traits. There are people with different levels of traits. There are people who are kind, and there are people who are kinder. And there are people that are very kind, and there are people that are cruel, and people that are crueler. And we wouldn't know how to measure those concepts except for our own subjective perception, but the Torah gives those to us. through the measurements of punishment and through the measurements of how the judges in the court system will deal with each individual person. And also, and how the king runs his own household will give us a paradigm for how to set up society. So all of that is, my friends, is like 10 lines of one short column in the Zohar. And yet we see that it's like the Zohar is a metaphoric journey. It's not a journey, it's a journey of metaphors from idea to idea to idea. But behind it all, we see that there's some unifying element to it. And that's where the healing takes place, when we see that. And so when we learn the Torah, and we learn the Zohar especially, we're seeing how all these concepts will weave together. Just like we were talking about this idea of the synchronicity of words that appear on the spiritual radar of our screen, our consciousness. So when we start to pay attention to the words of your life, you might be surprised on what they're trying to teach us. So I know for me that I'm going to stay out of the kitchen because it's full of people. And I already cooked a few of the items. But really, I think that wherever we are, wherever we go through, if these words are being sent to us to get us to take a look a little differently in the mirror and take a little look differently at the daily experience that we take for granted, is embedded with great measures of teachings and guidance if we know how to look. So all should be blessed to be guided into Shabbat with great joy and peace and sanctity, and to sense that the holiness is not in a book. I mean, of course, it is in the Torah, but it's in our soul, chiefly to begin with. And by keeping the Shabbat as best as we can, each person at their level, we're going to cause the sanctity of the day to emerge through us, around us, and in us, and we're going to have another experience altogether. So God bless you all. We'll see you on all the platforms next week. We start a new Torah 79 in Likkutei Moharan, so look forward to seeing you there on YouTube, Facebook, and, Insight Timer, Web Yeshiva, a few of the other locations if I get around to it. It's a lot of work, but it's the best work we could ever do, is being part of the life of Torah. God bless you all. Shabbat Shalom.